that thing which you would need to provide to an individual so that they would have property rights, then I think that's an ideal metaphor. I think a lot of people have talked about it as a currency, and we've discussed other metaphors for it. But probably the most constructive thing to do is to compare Bitcoin to other forms of property and other assets to deliver property rights to individuals. Sure. Well, in the absence of sound money, if fiat currency or the currency of any given society is not holding its purchasing power, then rational actors, be they corporations or individual investors or families, will tend to take their weak currency or their weakening currency, and they will want to invest it in some stronger asset that'll be a store of value. And so if we look at the United States, the S&P index has emerged as a store of value. There was a time when you could actually take your cash, put it in a bank account, and generate 5% interest. And if you thought you're getting 5% interest and the natural inflation rate was less, then you would do that. Most people concluded that that wasn't good enough, and they actually became stock market investors or real estate investors, or real estate ventures. And the reason they put them in real estate ventures is because real estate offered greater property rights and greater leverage. You could lever real estate 5 to 1, 10 to 1, and more readily finance it without a mark to market. So I would say the really sophisticated long-term investors looked to commercial real estate or some real estate play. The convention was I put it with a mutual fund or I invested in an S&P index. And I would say the working class solution is I put it in the bank in a savings account or credit union, and I get 3, 4, 5% interest. That regime kind of disappeared maybe 20 years ago, or certainly 10 years ago, when the yield on credit when the yield on savings accounts went to zero. So when the yield on savings account is zero, then there's no one thinking they're saving money at 0% interest. The perception was still the inflation rate was 2 or 3%, even though it was much higher than that. So now long-term store of value moves that represent ownership of a share of commodities or companies or something. And so all of those things are the ETFs are securities. And if you're not going to save with securities, you're going to buy individual stocks, which is a bit complicated. And some people did that. And the last thing is maybe, again, you go back and you invest in real estate. Now, commercial real estate investment is really very capital intensive. So you have to be in a 0.1% or the 1% of the investors to have the capital to do that. Most of the rest of the investors, if they wanted to pursue a real estate strategy, they would get a second investment property. Right, the classic would be I bought an apartment to Airbnb, or I bought a rental apartment or rental property, or I bought some kind of share in a REIT. And that takes us up to the stage where people started to notice Bitcoin. And I think that it's pretty clear, by the end of 2021, after the pandemic crisis, in their value, we saw extraordinary spikes in collectibles, in watches, in sports cars, in artwork. So as the central bankers were flooding the economy with excess currency, the currency is trying to find a tangible asset that will hold its value as the currency debases. And everybody chooses a different one depending upon what they know and what they're comfortable with. Bitcoin, right, is one of those assets which is now being monetized, and it is rising through this chaos to be the apex property asset or the apex monetizing asset. So I'm of the opinion that we're going to see a consistent demonetization of other key assets. And, one asset that you'll see demonetized, that we're seeing demonetized right now, is bonds. I mean, I guess the big monetized by excessive money printing. We see, and gold is a small one, right? Gold is 10 trillion. All the other four are 10x more than that. So the big four are the currencies, the bonds, the equities, and the real estate. They're starting to be demonetized now. And I'm not going to dwell on bonds. That's probably a discussion for another time, except to state that, obviously they're crashing. They've lost 20, 30, 40% of their asset value as interest rates come up. What I'm going to do is I'm going to focus upon real estate, because I really think the interesting discussion here is how Bitcoin demonetizes real estate. And what will it demonetize? Well, what does it mean to demonetize? Well, there's a value of real estate to a utility value to someone that's using it, right? The true utility rental value. And that doesn't matter whether it's a consumer or a business. There's a utility value to the real estate. And then to the extent that the price of the real estate is beyond that, that is the monetary premium. And there's a whole lot of commercial real estate that has a monetary premium. The way that you would know that it has investment property, or I bought a piece of commercial real estate, or I'm an investor in commercial real estate because that is the place that I wish to store my money, right? Why do you even want to store your money? Why do you even want to be an investor, right? The only reason anybody wants to invest in anything is because they believe that the risk-free rate of return on their money is too low to keep up with inflation. If I told you that the money was going to grow in value 10% a year and you knew the inflation rate to be zero, you wouldn't invest in anything, right? You would just put your money in a safe place and wait for it to create in value 10% a year. So in extreme hard money environment, the average person, right, the non-expert, isn't an investor. The only people that really should be investors in theory are professional investors, right? Professional could be, I got a second home and I rent it out. It could be I bought an apartment and I rent it out. It could be I Airbnb something. It could be I went in partners with three of my friends and we bought, a small garage, or we bought some warehouse or something. That's going on everywhere in the world. So how does Bitcoin demonetize that? Well, I think that you just want to start from first principles and you want to ask, what is property? And you can either get to pure property by taking away all the defects of real property,